Okay, so you can ask questions from the floor. I have 2 questions in English. The first question is, I have low blood pressure and my doctor recommended that I should drink a glass of red wine a day to help increase my blood pressure. In this case, have I broken the rule of Sinha, the 5 precepts? Yes, it's a simple answer. If you remember on the first evening, I gave some reflections on the particular nature of morality in Buddhism and the significant differences from the moral codes in other religions. And to recap, in the theistic religions or the great monotheistic religions that grew up in the Middle East, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they believe in a creator God and one who created humanity and laid down rules that human beings should obey, and if they're good and they obey the rules, then they'll go to heaven forever and ever, and if they're bad and they do bad things, then they'll go to hell forever and ever. So it's a kind of a basic reward-punishment system, kind of carrot and stick kind of idea. So as Buddhists, we don't believe that that's the way things are, or that's how things are set up. And we start off with the simple question of what's the best way to live together in communities? What's the best way we can live together as family, or as in a village, in a business? And what are the kind of underlying factors of a healthy, flourishing family or community? And what can we do to create or sustain those kinds of healthy communities? And the answers that we get is we need, at the very least, a sense of safety. We need to feel safe. We need to feel safe from physical, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. We need to be able to, ideally, just to put something down that belongs to us and not have to worry that someone's going to steal it. We have to, or we would like to have the kind of security and ease and peace of mind to know that someone is not trying to take our husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend away from us behind our back, or that our boyfriend, girlfriend or our partner is not seeing somebody else behind our back. We need to feel a sense of ease, that we don't always have to be worrying that someone is lying to us and trying to cheat us and deceive us. And we need to have, or we appreciate being in a situation where we have that sense of security that someone is not drinking alcohol and taking drugs, so they're not responsible for their behavior and not able to control their behavior and will act in unpredictable or harmful ways towards us. So we start off with certain basic principles, like what would be an ideal for our family or for our community. And then we get to the real practical, so well, what can you actually do, practically speaking, to try to create or to sustain that kind of environment? One of the key factors, we can say, looking at those points I've made already, is a sense of trust. You say that's probably the the key component. And something I've been looking into recently, this is something of a digression, because I often get questions about, how do people practicing precepts fit into this sort of cutthroat, competitive environment. But there's a very interesting area of economics that you might want to Google or study yourself. It's called the economics of trust, and the extent to which economic systems function through trust. Through you trust in your bank, when you go to buy something, the shopkeeper has to trust in your credit card company, for instance. Trust underlies so many transactions, and the more trust there is, then the more you can cut costs. If you're always having to check and to be aware of being cheated all the time, then you can waste a lot of time and money. When you're doing business with people that you trust, you can do it very efficiently and very well. It's one example of, or one way of pointing out that this very superficial idea that it's the dishonest and the unscrupulous people that always get ahead is not necessarily true. But anyway, we're talking now on the individual or the local level, family, community level. Trust. So how can we trust people when people don't know themselves, people have very little self-discipline, very little self-control, are very selfish, indulgent, blind? How can we have any kind of trust when most of the people we know are like that? And not only are they like that, but very few of the people who are like that or even see it as a problem. Well, to begin with, the path forward, and the best we can hope for, is we recognize the value of precepts. Now, we can't, as an act of will, just decide, as I was talking about the subject of forgiveness yesterday, you can't just say, from now on, I'm not going to be jealous of anyone, I'm not going to be nasty and cruel and selfish, I'm going to be a good person. It's totally unrealistic, because you can't make those kinds of changes just by making some kind of decision that you're going to be a different person. Because all those habits and negative emotions and so on have been accumulated over many years, maybe many lifetimes. But what you can do, and what members of a family and a community can do, is to make some boundaries and to take on certain kinds of restraint as to how we act and how we speak. Now, this area of our life is one which responds to willpower. So if you see something, like you see something, maybe you think, oh wow, what a cool, maybe you think, what a cool clock that is, I'd really like that clock in my bedroom. So you have a desire, you have the kind of animal instinct, you want something and you want to have it for yourself, but then you don't. You say, well no, well why? Well, it would be wrong, it would be bab, or it would be whatever. And so over and over again in our life we have this experience where we don't follow what we want to do, even if it's in a small thing, like you might see a clock or something that or an iPod or something, you think, I like that for myself, but you don't take it. So that's a proof, isn't it, that unlike animals, we have what we call a reflexive ability. And that means the ability to stand back from our instincts and to evaluate them and to make choices, or to put it in a simple kind of way, is to say no. We can all say no on certain occasions for uncertain circumstances. And that's a basic human quality. It's something that makes us human, that we can do that. So that's the tool we use. That's the basis of Buddhist morality. We're taking this human quality, this psychological fact that we are not just the slaves of our instincts, that although we have instincts, we don't necessarily in every case have to follow them. And then we take that and we educate that and we train it and we discipline it in order to create a sense of self-respect and a sense of trust in a community. So if you're living in a family or a community where people have, get angry with each other every now and again, if people who get angry, then when they get angry, they shout and they swear and they're violent, then you're not going to feel very happy. You're going to be very stressed out. But if you're living in a community where although people lose their temper every now and again, they get angry and upset, they don't express that physically or verbally. They restrain the physical and verbal expression of anger. Now it's important to recognize that this is not an argument in favor of repression, or just pretending or telling yourself you're not angry, or just holding everything down until you explode. But it's a recognition that when you act upon anger, you make things worse. You might have a very temporary sense that things are a little bit better, but in the long run, you make things worse. You make the relationships worse. You make the environment in which you're living worse. So it's recognizing there is anger, but not needing to follow it, or to indulge in it, or to express it. So if you're living somewhere where you know, I'm completely safe here, even though we have arguments every now and again, and we get upset with each other, and hurt and offended, and so on. At the very least, we're all safe. We don't ever abuse each other physically or verbally. And so we take that kind of standard, and each of the 5 precepts is applying that to a different area of our life. Say with the 3rd precept, okay, you're, say, a young married couple. You don't expect that your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend no longer finds anybody else attractive except for you. They might in the very first period when you're in love, but after a while it's just natural and normal. But if you have the confidence and the trust that even though my girlfriend or my boyfriend may find someone else attractive, they won't express that physically, verbally. They won't do anything behind my back. And that's a way of cutting all that kind of suspicion and paranoia and jealousy, because you have that sense of trust. If you don't have the sense of trust, then you can read something into so much, even your spouse or your boyfriend says they're coming when they come back later than they said they would do, and they have some excuse, and you're not sure whether to believe them or not, and you start to worry and start to brunk dang, and then you want to look in their mobile phone and see their last number and all these kinds of things, and just how much suffering, and because you don't trust each other. So if you make an agreement, you say, look, I'm not perfect. Every now and again I see somebody and maybe I feel like flirting with them or something, but you can trust me that I would never do anything behind your back. And so as normal human beings with normal sexual desires, you can be at peace in a relationship when you take that 3rd precept as your standard for conduct. So this has nothing to do about believing in God or not believing in God. It's just common sense. What increases the quality of relationships and the way that we live together is groups, in families and in larger communities or even in societies. Now the sort of long way round here, but coming back a little bit to this question, when the breaking of a precept is in the 5 precepts is always dependent on intention. There has to be intention. And so in the famous teaching of the Buddha, he said, Sila is intention. The essence of Sila is intention. This is why this introspection and looking within and being able to recognize your intentions is important training in keeping precepts. Now, if you have the intention to kill, for instance, then that would be breaking a precept, no matter what your reason for that might be. If you don't have the intention, if you were driving a car and you accidentally ran over a cat or a dog or something, although it would be you'd feel probably, I'd hope you feel rather bad about it for a while, but there's no reason that you would feel guilty for it or that you created bad karma because you had no intention to do that. Every time that you drive a car, then it's almost inevitable that small insects will get hit by the windscreen and die. So it's not possible to live a completely harmless life, even as a monk. But what you're careful of is your intention. So with each rule, it said the question of whether or not you break the precept is answered by what is your intention. Did you intend to do that? So in this particular case, did you intend to drink red wine? Answer is yes, I did, because my doctor told me to. Okay, well, that intention to drink is what determines whether you've broken the precept. As regards the heaviness of the karma, how significant that is, and the sense of karma, is dependent on other reasons why you drank. So if you break a precept and you do it in a very heedless, shameless kind of way, and you do it in a completely unnecessary kind of way, then you can create a lot of bad karma. But if you were to do something on the orders or the suggestion of a doctor, then the karma would be much less. Of course, you're not drinking to level of intoxication. You believe you're doing it for your health. But at the same time, your precepts are being broken, and it's a shame. And question is there no alternative? Yes, maybe there is some evidence, and even the evidence regarding the medical properties of drinking red wine is not universally acknowledged. It's an opinion that some doctors hold and some don't. The question is, as a practicing Buddhist, you would say to your doctor, look, doctor, I recognize that I need to do something about my low blood pressure, and that drinking red wine is one possibility, but are there any others? And the doctor said, well, yes, you could do this instead or that instead. And even if it's more difficult or more expensive, then you put your precept first. And you say, well, I prefer to do that instead so that I don't break my precept. So the precepts are giving you standards and giving you ways to reflect upon your conduct. So yes, it is breaking precept, not kind of a terrible thing, but if you can avoid it, it's better to. Yes. Question. Please kindly explain the meaning of the phrase "standing up for your happiness" or "standing up for yourself." How do we do this without hurting others? Did Buddha hurt his family when he left the palace to seek enlightenment? I personally, I don't tend to use this kind of phrases like standing up for your happiness or standing up for yourself, but my perspective on this would come from the Buddha's teaching that we need to develop, practice in a way that leads to happiness and benefit for ourselves and happiness and benefit for others. So there needs to be that kind of balance. Now, to generalize, it's often the case that very immature people who sort of no interest in quality of life or what's right and what's wrong or whatever, tend to think that it's their right and they're just to take. So they want to take and get as much as they can, and they think they're smart if they can do that successfully. When somebody wakes up a little bit and, in conventional terms, moves in the path of goodness, then they tend to find their joy in giving. But the effort to give can sometimes also be imbalanced, and it leads to the fact that many conventionally good people consider that doing anything for themselves is selfish, and that you should be always doing something for others all the time, and that's what a good person does, never thinks of themselves, only thinks of other people. The Buddha said that that's a mistaken view, and one that comes from not really understanding the way things are, because there's a important and fundamental relationship between your own welfare and that of others. Let me give an example of people who do have very wholesome and praiseworthy ideals, people who work for charities and for doing social work and social projects, often with very small wages and long hours and very difficult conditions. Then unless they have some boundaries, and unless they put some work into their own happiness, then they become completely drained, usually, and burn out after not very long. They're not able to sustain that kind of selflessness for very long. It's a wonderful ideal, but practically I've seen very few people who can do that for very long. The other thing, the other element of that is that if you had any contact with charitable groups and people who have very good intentions and they don't want any kind of financial reward from what they do, but they tend to be huge arguments, a lot of ego, views, opinions, conceit, I know what's right, you don't, and so on and so forth, and minor and petty and even major power struggles. So when someone's not doing their inner work and they don't really understand their own motivations and their own defilements, then very good activities, goodness and kindness, can easily become distorted and can lead to the exact opposite and lead to a great deal of suffering and disappointment all around. So the Buddha is saying that you have to give effort to both sides, the outside and the inside, other people and yourself, in a balanced way. And if within you're experiencing some inner peace and happiness, then people around you pick up on that. If you are someone who's able to be calm when everyone else is panicking, even though you don't say anything, you're already providing a wonderful assistance to everyone else. You know, if you've ever been in that situation where everybody's running around like chickens with their head cut off and everyone's panicking, you just need one person who's kind of calm and centered and grounded, and that can have a wonderful effect. I remember reading about Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Vietnamese teacher, talking about the experience of the Vietnamese refugees on the boat people, as they were called, in I guess it would be the 80s, when they were escaping from Vietnam by sea through South China Sea, and storms and pirates and very frightening experiences. And many people said that you have a very overcrowded boat with 10s or even 100 people on it, and you see pirates or some terrible thing about to happen. It only needed in 100 just one or two people who were calm, just to have that calming effect on everybody else. So if you're putting that work into being able to be mindful and centered and calm, even when things are very frightening and threatening, then it's both the inner work and it's having an effect on the people around you. When you're happy and balanced and kind, then that has a good effect on others. But those kinds of wholesome inner qualities, you don't have them as a right. You know, it's not like they're your possession. Once you have them, they stay with you. You have to keep training them and keep looking after them. Otherwise, if you're living in a very stressful environment, all that sense of groundedness you had and inner peace just disappears if you don't look after it. So that would be my kind of take on this idea of standing up for yourself and standing up for your happiness, meaning that if you think being good and being a good person means that you give up everything of yourself for others, then I think that you won't find that that's a very sustainable kind of attitude. Did the Buddha hurt his family when he left the palace to seek enlightenment? Well, yes, initially. I think that his parents, he said his parents cried. You know that story that we all know about the Buddha leaving in the middle of the night and getting on the horse and everyone's asleep, and there's actually no reference for that in the suttas themselves. That comes from poems and stories written after. The only reference that the Buddha himself made was he said when he left the palace, his parents were crying. They had tears in their eyes. The Buddha's story, is one we have to see within the context of his many, many past lives, and his life as a bodhisattva accumulating parami. And so this was the very last step of a career as a bodhisattva that had spanned millions and millions and millions of years. And so it was necessary to disappoint his family temporarily for a much greater good, which would be felt by all beings and for many generations afterwards. And let's not forget that as soon as the Buddha was enlightened, first place he went back home, and he was able to teach his father. His father, the king, became an arahant. His wife became a nun, and she became an arahant. And his son Rahula became a novice, And then when he was, I think around 20, when he'd newly ordained as a monk, then he became an arahant. So you can say the Buddha, in fact, gave the greatest gift to all his living family members, and many of his cousins and other family members and friends who became monks and then became enlightened beings afterwards. So in terms of, hurting ones we love, then it's not always so straightforward, is it? Even for us, we're not comparing ourselves with the Buddha, but one question I've often asked is, let's say your parents are gamblers. They like going to the casino and gambling huge sums of money and getting drunk. And then they say, we want you to go with us. Here's some money, you can gamble, and after we've been gambling, we can go drinking together and do it as a family. Now, if you were to say to your parents, if they encouraged you to that, and you say, no, I don't want to do that, would that mean that you were like nerakun, akatanju? Would you be a bad child? Only in Buddha's teaching, no, you wouldn't, because the encouraging your parents or supporting parents who are doing very harmful and dangerous and unwholesome things is actually the bad karma, and that finding some way to lead parents away from such bad, unwholesome activities would in fact be a way of repaying debt of gratitude to parents. So there are many cases where you have to ask yourself, if I'm disappointing my parents, what's my intention here? Is it just out of my own selfish desires, or is there something more solid and more wise here? And then we refer to the Buddha's teachings. And so if something the Buddha says is bad karma, and then we refrain from that, and we say we're not going to do that, then that's a wise action. Or if we want to do something that's very good, and all the wise people, the Arya Pugala, พระอริยเจ้าทั้งหลายพระพุทธเจ้าทรงเสริม then even if in the short term parents or people that we care for are unhappy about it, we can hope that in the long run they will change their mind. And of course, in the case of many Western monks, when they became monks, then parents were very unhappy. I know monks and parents wouldn't speak to their son when he became a monk for 5 years, wouldn't even answer the phone, wouldn't reply to letters or anything, just so angry and unhappy. But in almost every case, over a period of years, and not usually that long at all, they come round, and then when they see the changes in their son, and they see the kind of person that their son is turning into through a monastic training, they tend to become very happy and proud. But initially, at the beginning, they're very unhappy. So it's a matter of having a standard, like an objective standard. We take standard of the Buddha's teaching, so that if we have some kind of conflict of views with someone who's important to us, whether it's parents or friends or girlfriend, boyfriend, then having some way of testing it against the teachings of wise people, so that we're not just เข้าข้างตัวเอง or it's like taking your own side. Another question. Well, I am still enjoying the meditation, even I always start to feel much pain in my legs. I feel like fighting the pain. I want to overcome it. Sometimes I think 30 minutes is too long, sometimes too short, because I need more time to overcome the pain in my legs. Is this the right way? I still wonder what it will feel like to have real samadhi. Yeah, I did speak about this a little bit last night, and one of the things I've been trying to emphasize during this retreat is it's not just like black and white, if you realize samadhi then you've got something out of meditation. If you don't realize samadhi, you've been wasting your time. What I'm trying to point out is that the very effort to develop meditation skills involves learning all kinds of life skills which can be put to use elsewhere, and enables us to understand the way our minds work and to be able to deal with that. I'm saying, just now I mentioned, what happens when you find your mind won't stay on a meditation? How quickly do you get discouraged? Again, another digression. I don't know if anyone's familiar. I recommend works of a writer called Malcolm Gladwell. Does anybody read Malcolm Gladwell? There's various of his books. The Tipping Point. One of his latest books called Outliers, which is a kind of study of winners, if you like, or very, very gifted people and what makes them different from others. Well, in one chapter, he looks into why are Asian kids generally better at maths than Western kids, and it's very interesting. But just the one point to make: they had a Japanese boys and American boys, and they were given maths questions which they knew were too difficult for their age group, that they wouldn't be able to answer. And they wanted to see how long it took before the kids gave up. And the Japanese children were like 40% longer in every case. It took them much longer before they were willing to give up. Then they were given a second test, and in this there were two questions. Again, both of them probably more difficult, but one question was similar to the first one, which they were unable to answer. And the second one was a different kind of question. Now what happened was, in almost every case, the American kids said, that one is the same as the one I couldn't answer, so I'll leave that, and I'll try the other one, which is a different kind of question. I might have better luck. The Japanese kids, on the other hand, they thought, this first question is like that one that I didn't understand, but it's a little bit different. So maybe if I can work out this one, then I'll be able to understand the first one as well. So this is the kind of mind state that leads to success. It's that ability to persevere, never giving up, just keep going, rather than, I can't do this, go on to something else. That's sort of dilettanti. So the conclusion from many of the studies in this book is that what distinguishes Asian children from American children in maths and science is not some kind of Asian genetic inheritance, but it's simply an ability to persevere and to stay with something and not give up. And so this is one of the key qualities that we develop in meditation. Meditation is really tough, it's difficult, but being willing to stick with it, even though you're not getting any immediate gratification from it, is a maturing practice for the mind. It's strengthening that quality of mind which is stay with something which is valuable, even though you're not getting results that you want straight away, or you can't force it to be the way you want it. You can't get the answers off anybody else. You can't copy the answers off the internet. You have to do the work yourself. There's no corruption possible. It's really you're face to face with the way things are. There's no cheating involved. You can't cheat. You have to do the work. There's no shortcuts. So, giving yourself tasks in which there's not even the temptation of cheating, because there's no way you can cheat. You have to do it. You have to stick with it. That's a very maturing practice, and something that has really. So, even if the mind's not very peaceful yet, even just a little glimpse of peace, there are so many useful qualities that you develop by trying, the very effort of trying to do this. Now with pain, physical pain is a part of life. We've all experienced it in the past, we're all going to experience it in the future. Some of us are going to experience severe pain sometime in our life, much, much worse than we've ever experienced in the past. So it seemed to me to make sense to investigate the nature of pain, given as it is something that unlikely we can completely avoid in our life, and to develop a more wise relationship to it. Secondly, if you look at your life and the decisions that you've made in your life, you may observe how often we don't do things that would really be good to do, simply because we're afraid that it might be uncomfortable, or it might be painful, or it might be difficult. So our life becomes very narrow, when we have this very sort of restricted comfort zone. I'll do anything, I'll go through anything as long as it's not difficult, or as long as it's not painful, as long as it's not, sufferings involved. So in the meditation, then we're taking a new kind of approach. You're saying, I'm willing to be with the physical pain of sitting for a reasonable amount of time, so that I can learn about how my mind reacts to it, how my mind deals with pain, and what increases pain and what decreases pain, how much of pain is physical, how much is subjective. These are the kinds of contemplation we call contemplative science, the science of understanding the nature of our human existence as a direct experience, not as a philosophy. But in the practice of meditation, we also have to recognize our limitations and be realistic. If you're looking at pain, you're experiencing pain every time you meditate, it's depressing, and that's true. It's fact. If you're very skilled meditator, that's not true. But for most everyone else, if you know that every time you sit, you're going to have to deal with physical pain, after a while, you're not going to enjoy it very much. And it's really important that you should enjoy and value meditation. For that reason, when you experience physical pain, it's not a good idea just to change your position immediately, just to be patient with it just for a while. But if the pain builds up, then you have a choice. One choice is to take the physical pain as a meditation object, as I explained last night. The second alternative is merely to change your posture. And that's perfectly all right. It's not wrong to do that. And if you're feeling you're really into the meditation and you find your mind's becoming more calm and more peaceful, and you want to follow this more deeply, then it might be a wise decision just to change your posture so that you can be comfortable and can continue with the investigation of the breath, for instance, or whatever your object might be. So learning about pain, understanding it, understanding your usual reactions to it, how to deal with those more skillfully, that's one part of what we're learning in Buddhist practice, but that we shouldn't do it too often or so much that it feels a real burden or oppressive or heavy or depressing. One thing is we don't have to fight. I mean, one of the most ridiculous cliches in English is, when people die of cancer, and it always says, he lost the fight against cancer, the battle against cancer, as if, it's like nature is your enemy, and you've got to fight it and sort of squeeze out every last second of life, and then it's sort of a sad loss. But cancer is, if you don't die of cancer, you're going to die of something else. And the reason why so many people die of cancer these days is because we live much longer lives. And formerly we would have died before we got cancer. But we don't make a monster out of cancer. It's nature, and we're going to die. We're going to get old. We're going to get sick. We're going to die, and it's painful. It's painful if we have it, and it's terrible, perhaps worse even, to see someone we love with cancer. But in the end, it's not nature is not something that you can fight. It's not something that you can overcome. Even if if you're to go into remission through after having cancer, it's not like that you've defeated the natural world, or you've done something. It's just the way causes and conditions work, and maybe at yourself a few more years. But the idea in Western medicine is often that life under any circumstances is a success. As Buddhists, we're really interested in the quality of life, particularly at the very end of our life. The state of mind is a very important conditioning factor for the next life. Please explain the concept of Dhamma Discourse in English. Okay, I guess that's democracy, isn't it? I'll tell you an interesting word. I can see if anybody knows what this word is. Kakocracy. K-A-K-O. Kakocracy. And I don't know how whether they teach this in political science classes or not, but the definition of kakocracy is government by the least qualified and the most incompetent. Good word to remember, kakocracy. Okay, well this is tamocracy, or Dhamma Discourse. And as far as I know, this is a phrase coined by Ajahn Puttadasa some 30 years ago now, I guess. And I'm just trying to remember what his concept of this. I think you have to look in his works, his essays and talks and books. But obviously the idea is with any kind of ocracy, it means what you take as your main basis. So democracy is the people as the basis for government, and Dhamma Discourse means obviously taking Dhamma or Dhamma as a basis. How that would work in practice, I'm not really sure, I must say. I've not really thought this one through sufficiently. But I think that one thing I might say is that it's worth considering what are kind of Buddhist values, or what kind of values do we want to uphold in the society. And I think we need to come to that level of values before we, as a standard, or as a reflection when we're considering different political programs, economic systems, and so on, with the idea that it's an added or important criterion. You say, well, yeah, we could do this and we could do that, maybe more jobs or more this, but how does that affect our values? And I think that kind of value analysis, that dimension, that criteria, is almost absent in this country. Certainly don't see very much Buddhist influence on the development of the country over the past 30, 40 years. So if we're talking about trust and an investigation of what really makes us happy, not what advertising tells us or tries to persuade us makes us happy. What people are telling us, that consumption makes us happy, and spending money makes us happy, and possessing things makes us happy. But if you put all that propaganda to one side just for a moment and really ask yourself the question, what really makes us happy? Or what has made me happy in the past? And what is happiness anyway? Then if we can agree that a society and its conventions and its economic system should seek as best as it can to promote the happiness of people in the country as it's truly experienced, not some idea of happiness based on ideas of consumption patterns, then that might be closer to something called Dhamma Discourse. Of course, the problem is that people are very attracted to power, and usually the people who love to have power over other people are the people who you don't want to have power over other people. So when people have a certain amount of money and they're very comfortable, then and that kind of wealth then starts to lose its ability to give kind of pleasure that you want. Many people want to find ways of increasing their power. So in a situation, politics is about power management, and so finding ways, skillful ways of distributing and allocating power so that the most unscrupulous people don't have unlimited access to power would be important in a Dhamma Discourse kind of system. So, what's the time? To be born as a human being is said to be very difficult. 1, why is this so? 2, why do we have to work hard to keep population growth in check? That's a good question, isn't it? To be born as human being is difficult because you have to at least be keeping 5 precepts and leading a reasonably intelligent and sensitive and moral kind of life before you can create the causes and conditions to take human birth. and that's not very common. When we think about the obvious, the doubts will come. Well, look, we've got 6,000-7,000 million people in the world now, and compared with 50 years ago, population growth has exploded, and it's probably going to be like a really major issue in the next 20, 30 years. The pressure on resources, particularly water resources, is going to be huge. So doesn't that contradict what the Buddha is teaching? Well, if we, this kind of question does demand a certain acceptance of Buddhist cosmology and the Buddha's presentation of the samsara and the wheel of becoming. But just in Thailand, if we say like 65 million people, but how many ants, how many mosquitoes, how many worms? So if you were to take just all the smaller creatures that you can see with your eyes, then they actually dwarf the amount of human beings. There are millions of small creatures, and these are just in the animal realm. So human beings, compare the number of human Thai people and the number of Thai termites. I mean, I'm sure termites think we're quite an insignificant species. We can't eat wood like they can. And so not just that, but the beings in other realms, in the Preta realms, hell realms, and the other lower realms, far exceed the number of human beings. So seen within the context of the total number of sentient beings and the realms in which a being can be reborn, then human being is a difficult realm, particularly because of the particular qualifications for birth in this realm. I myself, this is speculation, and I don't have any real backing for this. But I think that this particular planet is not the only human realm. I think there are many human realms in the universe, and this is one of them. And as long as human beings are keeping 5 precepts as a very basic standard, there will always be a human realm. So it seems quite likely that in the next 100 years, human beings are going to completely destroy this planet, then that wouldn't be the end of the human realm, but the end of human existence on this particular planet. But there'll still be a human realm. So if this is speculation, if we look at the evolution of this planet from the Big Bang onwards, say at a certain point in its evolution, it fulfilled all the necessary conditions to provide a place in which human beings could live. So as a human realm appeared on this particular planet at a certain point in its evolution. But the human realm is not restricted to the human population of planet Earth. It's a realm of being. It's not in one particular place. Why do we have to work hard to keep population growth in check? Well, because if we don't, we're not going to have anywhere to live and anything to eat or drink, and it's going to be pretty miserable. That would be my answer. Okay, so I think that's enough for this morning. So any more questions from it? We've got another 5 minutes. Any questions from the floor? Anything you want to teach me? Oh, there's another English question here. Oh, I thought this was... Oh, okay. There's another couple more questions. Okay, so we've got another 5 minutes or so. I'll just answer one more question. If breaking precepts and attaining karma is based on intentions, then wouldn't that mean clumsy people and dull-witted people will get away with breaking precepts? For example, a good-hearted but lousy driver runs over cats, dogs, or even people regularly, but doesn't have any intentions of doing so and feels horrible about it. Yeah, good question. Well, I think with karma, then we can compare it with civil ordinary civil law system. That you have, we have concept of what we call criminal neglect. So, in case of someone drinking alcohol and then driving, then they might run somebody over while they were drunk. And you say, well, did they intend to run somebody over? Well, they didn't. But they created the causes and conditions which made something like that very likely, and so they would be liable to prosecution and even to go to prison for being criminally negligent. So the word negligent is equivalent to the word brahmat. So kwam brahmat, would be karmically significant. Or if you're driving again and you don't bother to blow up the tires, keep the tire pressure correct, or to look after the car properly, and then it has an accident, then again you'd be responsible. So if you're acting irresponsibly, then that intention just to let things go, although it's not a direct intention to kill something, it would have a significant contributory influence, and one which would be karmically meaningful. Yeah, but the question is wrongly stated, and it says that, does that mean clumsy and dull-witted people will get away? Well, they're not getting away with breaking precepts, because if their intention was to get away with something, then they would break the precept. Again, it's not this kind of reward and punishment system. There's no concept of revenge. This isn't Thailand. This is one thing to be very proud of, that Thailand's not a revenge culture. China has got a revenge culture. The Western world has got a revenge culture. A lot of times in the Bible there's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This idea of honor can only be restored when you kill somebody who's killed your loved one. These kinds of ideas have been around in the world for generations and still cause of great pain and suffering. It's fortunate that in Buddhist societies although Buddhists sometimes want revenge and they do something, but there's no backing for it. There's no, not anywhere in the Buddhist teaching is there that kind of passage, an eye for an eye kind of teaching.